certainly there was no room in this time to say the things that he did. And so I would hope that there would be unity in terms of the American people saying this doesn't go when after a tragedy like this. But I will say that I think we all assumed that the American people had that kind of sensibility in the past. And then found out in the election that while we might have felt that way, a lot of Americans supported Trump nonetheless. But I would hope today, after this tragedy, we will see the country coming together, hopefully saying we're coming together in our mourning of what happened and in our rejection of the way it was painted by Donald Trump.
I want to now get the thoughts of Jim Townsend, who served under the Obama and Biden Democratic administrations as a Deputy Secretary of Defense. Welcome to you, Jim.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Jim, I want to get on to, I suppose, the politics which has entered into or intruded into, depending on your point of view, this story of this air disaster in Washington. Before we do that, though, in as far as you as having worked on the Democrat side of the aisle, leaving politics aside, what we heard from Donald Trump, the president, earlier on, will that have any material impact on the proper process of investigating what happened with this disaster?
Well, I think what he said, his whole approach to pointing the finger at blame and this type of thing is going to make the real investigation harder, because this open statement that he made certainly injects politics into it. And certainly the transportation secretary and other political appointees who will be involved in the investigation will have to deal with what Trump has already said. They're supposed to be totally above politics, nonpartisan, pure expert review. It takes a long time to do it, but now they're going to have to do it in the political minefield, and that's too bad for that.
Yeah, I mean, the process there remains unchanged, does it not? The process by the FAA with military cooperation of putting together the evidence from the data, from the well, there's a great deal of video and eyewitness testimony to be gathered together, all of it expertly and analysed. That process won't be materially changed in that way, will it?
No, the process will remain the same. But, you know, he has already tried to finger, the people in the control tower, the air traffic controllers. He's already kind of hinted that there could have been a problem up there because of DEI hiring. So he's already thrown some shade, as they say, that will have to be incorporated into this process. The process won't change. The FAA won't change, et cetera. But what has changed for them is the political lens at which this administration will look at the investigation results. Right.
Well, the line here is slightly uncertain, but we'll persist with it, I think, because we're getting, I think, pretty clearly the gist of what you're saying, and I'm interested in your answers. I mean, I was saying earlier on, commenting from, as it were, afar, that your country is just so profoundly polarized, so split, for and against Donald Trump. Donald Trump won the election back in November by a narrow margin, but he won it, and it was a clear victory. People knew what they were voting for. Will this make any difference to the current and the climate of opinion in America?
Well, I think it should. It's certainly in the short term. It should make a difference in terms of what he said at the end of his statement. I think whether you're a Democrat or Republican, polarized or not, certainly there was no room in this time to say the things that he did. And so I would hope that there would be unity in terms of the American people saying this doesn't go when after a tragedy like this. But I will say that I think we all assumed that the American people had that kind of sensibility in the past, and then found out in the election that while we might have felt that way, a lot of Americans supported Trump nonetheless. But I would hope today, after this tragedy, we will see the country coming together, hopefully saying we're coming together in our mourning of what happened and in our rejection of the way it was painted by Donald Trump.
Okay, now we heard the president earlier on at some considerable length set out his argument that diversity hiring had weakened standards of safety and the efficiency and value of the Federal Aviation Authority. Now, you were there during the periods and under the leaders that he described. Just answer those points for us if you can.
Well, the idea that DEI or this diversity has weakened policymaking or the putting into action policies that have been decided, it's it's patently false. I have been part of the government for 35 years. The Republicans and Democrats, all kinds of policies dealing with hiring and this type of thing, and I have not seen a time where a certain kind of hiring has hurt anything in the government. This is nothing but terrible politics, not backed up by any kind of science or any kind of study. This is pure barroom talk from someone who is using this for political means. And I'm hoping that this kind of experience today will begin to turn people to understand that this is what Trump is all about, and this kind of thing has no place in the United States.
Okay, Jim Townsend, thank you for joining us with your perspective from the other side of the aisle, the blue side, the Democratic side in the United States of America.
The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, you had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place. Well, you follow him in, that means like everything's fine, follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold, but clear, and clear as you could be. You could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You could have gone down. You could have gone straight up, straight down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going and then made a slight turn at the very end, and by that time it was too late. They shouldn't have been at the same height, because if it was at the same height, you could have gone under it or over it, and nobody realized, or they didn't say that it's at the same height. At the same height, it still wouldn't have been great, but you would have missed it by quite a bit. Could have been 1,000 feet higher. It could have been 200 feet lower, but it was exactly at the same height, and somebody should have been able to point that out. So all of this is going to be studied, but it just seems to me, from a couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense, some really bad things happened, and some things happened that shouldn't have happened. So you had a helicopter going in an identical direction. You had a helicopter that was at the exact same height as somebody going in essentially the opposite direction. You had a plane that was following a track, which is a track that every other plane followed. And I don't imagine, I know I've heard today that they might have been following the preceding plane, which was pretty close, but not that close, the preceding plane. But you wouldn't have even been able to see that because of the direction that the helicopter was coming in at. So you had a confluence of bad decisions that were made, and you have people that lost their lives, violently lost their lives.